I just want to reiterate what was already shared here about, I promise you, and I don't care if you've taken it several times, if you listen with real intent and focus and do the homework, you will be overwhelmed. You will feel like you're drowning. And I'm warning you to tell you that's okay. I understand that. It's okay. And it's not that I will give you enough today with your homework plus what I teach you that it will take you the 10 weeks to incorporate. Because it's hard to change old habits. And so to actually get it and make it happen and make it work, it takes longer than a week. And then next week I'm going to give you more. And the next week I'm going to give you more. So it's very easy by the third week, if you're not used to being here, to just feel like, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm right. I'm a rotten mother. I'm right. I can't do this. And that's not it at all. It's to give you tools. Now, my hope is that by the end of the semester, by the end of 10 weeks, with 10 different topics, you come away with 2 that you want to really work on and focus on and incorporate. With that being said, I have been told multiple times that my voice haunts them at various times with their children. Some for good and some for ill. So even though you focus on maybe a couple of things to do, other ideas will be recalled to your memory, which is a good thing because that means that you listened with the Spirit and the Spirit is bringing them to your memory. It doesn't mean that you're going to be perfect at them. It doesn't mean that but it will be, oh, I could have done that differently, and this is what I might want to try. So know that this is overwhelming. You know, sometimes I feel like, I'm not a convert, but I feel like maybe it's how converts feel. You know, it has to be overwhelming to join this church from a different background and a different culture. And so you just have to go little by little, faith in every footstep. Just make it go along. And that's the way this class is. So if you feel overwhelmed, because we women are self-critical in major ways, so often you'll sit there and just feel like you're the only one that feels that way. Everybody else is getting it, and I'm the only one that can't do this. And that's not true, because everyone is feeling overwhelmed. At least everyone with children still at home is going to be feeling overwhelmed, and that some of us empty nesters are still thinking we need to do better with our grandkids. So that is a given. What she said about percentages is the goal. We changed line upon line, precept on precept. So if you yell 100% of the time, that's your method of getting cooperation, is to just raise your voice, and you feel like when I get to a certain point, they finally do it. And we're going to teach you how to not do that. But if that's your style of getting cooperation, then after we have that lesson, then it will be connected with discipline. If you yelled 95% of the time and remembered 5% of the time, you're making progress. And you give yourself credit for it. And it's a good thing. And we're excited about it. So give yourself credit for little steps along the way, because that's what it's really all about, are the little steps along the way. The other thing that I want you to do, and it was kind of mentioned here, is, and it's a reminder to those of you who've been here before, an invitation to those of you who haven't, is I would like you to keep a ponder pad. Now, a ponder pad is just a piece of paper somewhere that's not too floating. So in the back of your notebook or wherever you're keeping your notes. And as we go through these classes, your mind can handle about 5 times faster than what I'm talking. So your mind will wander. That's just a given. And that doesn't mean you're not paying attention. It means that that's just the way it goes. In those moments of wandering mind, you may have an idea about how to help Johnny go to bed better at night. And it might be just this fleeting idea. Write it down. Write it down. I don't want you to stay there and ponder about it for a long time right now. I want you to write it down, though, so you don't forget it. And then come back mentally with us, and we'll keep going. But then sometime during the week, every week, I would like you to review your notes and review your ponder pad. Because then you're inviting the Spirit to teach you what you need, that I don't know what you need, but the Lord knows what you need. And this becomes the invitation to invite the Spirit to teach you those things that you need to know about your family and about your children. So if you will do that, you will receive some inspiration and revelation that's far beyond what we're going to talk about in these lessons. So any questions about that? Yes?
This isn't a question, but it's a comment, and it was when you asked us what we got from the class.
Yes,
earlier.
yes.
That's what I like most about it. In fact, when I just got out of the car, I had that just an inspiration that I should write a thank you note to so-and-so about something that happened over Christmas. And I thought, here it comes.
That's it. Yes, that's it.
And I thought, I call it my inspiration list. And it's just the little ideas that are there for me personally that don't really have to do with what we're talking about, but that's my favorite part of this class.
Yeah, yeah. And if you invite and act upon those thoughts, they will come more loudly. That's not a very good term, but you will hear them better, and they will come more often. So if you are interested in them but don't record them and act upon them, you will lose them. You will lose that ability to be sensitive to those promptings. So let me share with you a couple of quotes that I find fabulous. And these were actually given in connection with conference, but I feel like any place that we are where whoever is presenting has prepared by the Spirit, and you listening have prepared by the Spirit, I feel like these promises are applicable. And I want you to know, I seek to prepare by the Spirit. I really, really try hard to be sensitive to what your needs are with children that you're raising in this day and age, which is a blessing to my grandchildren because I remain very close to them. I want to know what they're doing and what's going on and what's going on in the schools and what's happening. And it's wonderful because it keeps my relationship with them good, but that's my feed for what your children are probably dealing with a great deal. And so I want you to, this first one is by Elder Jeffrey R. Holland. It was given as an address, an ensign to the nations, but listen to the promises. If we teach by the Spirit and you listen by the Spirit, some one of us, meaning somebody who is presenting, it could be me, it could be a comment that we hear from each other, some one of us will touch on your circumstance, sending a personal, prophetic epistle just to you. I love that. I love that. I take that quote with me to sacrament meeting, thinking if I listen, it may be the youth speaker, but there will be a personal, prophetic epistle. Don't you love the way he puts words together? Okay, and the next one was given by Elder Hale, and it was in a conference address, Strengthening Faith and Testimony. But this was what he said. I promise that if you will listen, you will feel the Spirit well up within you. You will have those moments in these next 10 weeks. Now, it's not going to be every moment, But you will definitely have those strong moments as you sit here. The Lord will tell you what he wants you to do with your life right now. In conferences, we can receive the word of the Lord meant just for us. And I feel like, he says in conferences, but I feel like anytime you go into a place where you listen by the Spirit and it's prepared by the Spirit, that same promise is available to you. So I testify to you that if you will come listening with the Spirit, I promise you I will prepare with the Spirit. And if you will listen, you will hear a message just for you and your family. I know that that is true. I know that that is true. Even though I don't know all of your families and I don't know your situations, I know that Heavenly Father wants you to have your answers in this time for your children in this day and age. And this is a challenging time to live. And so I love those. I love those quotes. I love those promises. Okay, just as a quick overview, I want to cover some of the things that we possibly might be covering this semester. Today we're going to do Take Time to Teach. Next week we are going to do 5 simple things that are absolute essentials in your home. And that will be prayer, scripture reading, temple attendance, family home evening, and Sabbath day, observance of Sabbath day, which will bring in the Come Follow Me program and how to apply it in your homes. Then we will take a week on the personalities, studying the different kinds of personalities you have with your children, your personality, who you are, and how that makes you conflict with some of yours and flow with some of them, and how we can parent to those who are not exactly like us. How do we parent then to the difficult child that is not like us? If we are focused and a driven personality, and we are going to do things right in our home, and we are going to get things done, and you have a child that lives in La La Land that just flits and floats and is happy, how do you parent that child without just getting so frustrated you can't stand it? We'll talk about that on that week. We'll talk one week about building the self-esteem. And self-esteem is, to me, a worldly word. And so as we translate it into the gospel, really it's how to help your children feel their individual divinity and worth. And so, and that's critical, that in this day they know that they're divine, because that gives them the strength to stand up against the worldly temptations that they'll have. So that's a pretty critical one. Then we're going to spend 2 weeks on discipline. The first week we will talk about why your children misbehave. And honestly, they do not stay awake at night thinking about ways to push your buttons. It feels like it, but they don't. So we'll talk about what is inside of them that makes them misbehave rather than be compliant. So we'll talk about those reasonings in their little spirits. And then the next week we will talk about how to correct misbehavior in a positive way, so it doesn't defeat the child and make them feel worthless, but they separate themselves from the behavior, and they can see the behavior is bad, but they're still of value. And we'll talk about tools in how to correct discipline. Then we will spend a week on learning how to communicate with each other. A lot of our problems just stem from miscommunication. And so we will spend a week on communication, building relationships through communication. And that will be a fun week. We are going to spend a week on coping with stress and adversity, which in the beginning, when I first started teaching this class, that class was geared to you coping the stress that comes from being a mom of a lot of little people, and just the adversity of living in this time of life. But since then, I've realized we've got to expand this week and talk about anxiety and stress that our youth are feeling. And what can we do to help them cope with that stress and anxiety that's increasing in prevalence with our young people and with adults, but way too many teenagers and little people are suffering from anxiety, and we need to know how to deal with that and how to focus on what we can do about that. So we'll talk about that. We'll spend 1 week on morality. That includes cyberspace, that includes screen time, that includes pornography, that includes dating, that includes all of those things that you would put under the big umbrella of being morally clean. And then we will spend a week on marriage. And this semester, we will talk about the divine differences between men and women, why men are created the way they are, and why we are created the way we are, and why they are not meant to be the same. And the fallacy of our trying to think we'll only be happy when we think alike, because that's faulty thinking, and if that is your goal, you'll never be happy, because we're wired different. We came different. But when you understand the divine reasons why we're different, it becomes exciting to discover and learn to support one another. So that's kind of the outline for our semester. I think probably some of you, even as you listen to the topics, it's like, ooh, I don't know if we can do all that. And so I'm just telling you, really up front, I realize that. So don't get hung up on that. It's okay. We're just going to do one step at a time. The other thing that I just wanted to share with you up front is this is going to be a fabulous semester, because 1 week of this semester I won't be here, and Tracy will teach. And so you'll see the product. I mean, what happens when you raise your children with these kinds of principles. And so I will be down in Utah. I am doing a women's conference in Bountiful, and so I will be out of town for that week. So while I'm down there, I'm going to do Bountiful and Layton, and so I won't be able to be back in time to teach this class. So I'm excited for you. I always feel bad that I get my kids to do it when I'm not here, but I really would like to sit back there and listen to them do it and see what I'm a little bit nervous sometimes about what they'll say, but, because I think Tracy particularly likes to tattle on me, and so it could be, maybe it's a good thing I won't be here, but she will be fun. It will be a fun lesson. So that's kind of our overview. So today, what we want to talk about is really interesting, because every once in a while I have these strong confirmations about, whoa, we are really on the right track. And when Come Follow Me for the family and the individuals came out, I'm going, yes, this is right. This is the Lord's plan. This is the Lord's plan. And sometimes I'm just afraid we don't have a vision of it. So what we're going to talk about today is that vision of Come Follow Me, which literally is the vision of righteous, intentional parenting, where you conscientiously, with real intent, take time to teach. And part of that is discovering when are the moments. I mean, if you're thinking that what I'm saying is, okay, every day now I'm going to gather my little children, I'm going to put them on the couch, and then I'm going to preach to them. That's not it. That won't work. So it's how to recognize these precious teaching moments, and then how to jump off your mental and emotional busyness to stop, recognize the moment, get in the space, and teach them. And so that's what we want to talk about today, is how do you do it. It's not a fantasy, it's a reality. You can do it. But we have to get the vision of what that looks like. And too often we think, okay, I desperately want to be a good parent, so therefore I'll sit them up every morning before breakfast and set them on the couch, and I will take time to teach them the principle of the day. That's not what I mean. So we've got to learn to discover it. First of all, you have to see the world that they're living in. Some of you who have junior high, middle school, or high schoolers, you're very aware. Some of you with your earlier children, preschoolers, not so much, but some. And then as they get into elementary school, it's a huge awakening for you if you're sending them out into the world. But this world is governed by, if you will, the thing that rolls the clogs in the wheel for our teenagers and our middle schoolers and some of our elementaries, is our society out there is a society of disrespect. So you want to teach respect in your home. You have to understand that their whole world outside the home is one of disrespect. That doesn't mean every single individual is disrespectful, but you look at patriotism or honoring the President of the United States or honoring the President of any organization. Everyone feels really free to condemn, to complain, to find fault, and because of the media that we have today, the internet and Twitter and all this, you can become very vocal and very in your face, if you will, about your disagreements. And so our children are raised by a society that says that's okay, that's okay, that's not only just okay, that's the way you should be. If you disagree with something, it is your responsibility to stand up and make waves. So just thinking about, we're not going on the politically right or wrong, if you should, how to publicly disagree. I'm just talking about this environment that they're in. The second part of this environment that they're in is that they are raised in a world of entitlement. If you listen to ads, if you watch movies, if you interact with any kind of media, it's that you deserve this. You deserve a bigger house. You deserve a nicer car. Just call Wayfair.com and it's delivered to your door and it's free. And the postage is free, and just, you deserve it. You deserve it. We're not talking about finance and budgeting and can you afford it. We're saying, hey, you deserve it. And so they're raised with this entitlement. Also, if you've noticed, if they get involved in sports or they get involved in most any activities, everybody gets a trophy. You don't earn anything anymore. It's simply you get it because you are. And they kind of get that attitude that if you want me to do something, then what are you going to give me for it? You want me to do a job? How much is it worth to you? And it seems like that society is giving them payoffs or brownie buttons or trophies for whatever. We've also, we're raising I talked to an elementary school teacher. I was working in the doctor's office, and she was a patient who had come in, and so I was chatting with her a bit before she went back to see the doctor, and she had been teaching elementary school for a long time. And I asked her what changes she had seen over the last 10, 15 years. What changes are you seeing? And she was teaching about 8-year-olds, 7 and 8-year-olds, which is that second and third grade-ish is what she was teaching. And she said one of the things that she had noticed is, number one, those age children quit. If anything gets hard, they quit. So they can't do hard things. Number two, they feel like they should be rewarded for anything. And number 3, they didn't know how to problem solve. They couldn't solve problems. So if something is hard, rather than thinking of another solution, they just quit. And so that's part of this entitlement kind of mentality where you expect someone else to do it for you and give it to you, and just because you're you. Now, some of our parenting tends to fall in to making that happen in our homes when we become a rescuing parent and don't teach them some of these things. And because the society's this way, we feel like we're a bad parent if we don't rescue them. So if I make you suffer a consequence, like if you forgot your lunch, you go hungry, if I make you suffer that natural consequence, then I must be a bad parent because I'm making you suffer. And and if you tell one of your friends that, they go, "What? You didn't take them lunch? How could you not?" And then we feel guilty and awful. So sometimes we tend to buy in to helping to create that feeling in our homes. The next thing that is very, very interesting, it has to do with the attachment lesson that we had at the first of last semester. But our children are attaching to their peers more than their families, and therefore look to peers for approval, for validation. And when they attach to peers, you've got them being raised by immature people. So you have immature people looking to immature people to tell you whether or not they have value. And so it's critically important that we have them attached to us so that we become the one who helps feed their feelings of value. And over this 10 weeks, we'll talk about it. And then the last one is, and this was brought out by Elder Bednar in his talk about seeing things as they really are, it's the virtual reality identity. And so many of our children feel like, because you can have virtual reality identities, they can create these personas on different games and things. It's almost like they can disengage who they really are. So I can be some identity during the week and do things that may not be in accordance with things I know are true, but it's kind of because I'm out there and I'm with them and I'm doing it there. But then I can come to church on Sunday and be the good person and put on the persona of being, have a strong testimony and living righteously and doing things right. So in this virtual reality thing, it's almost like sometimes they give themselves permission, some of these gaming games where they're out killing and destroying and blowing things up, you give yourself permission to act in a way that the other half of you says is not morally right. So in this, what we have to do in parenting is bring them together so they're one person, and they are always that one person. Talk a lot about that when we do self-esteem and helping them bring their identity to divinity and finding out who they really are and living that person. And so that's what the problems are out there. Now I want to talk about what are the problems then with parenting. What do we have then as parents that, if this is the problems that they're dealing with, what are we dealing with that sometimes makes that worse? And the parent hang-ups are, number one, because of what society is teaching in this fast food, fast fun, fast cures, fast, we feel like we are responsible to help our children have fun. So they should have a fun life. Number two is we are over anxious to keep our children involved in everything outside of the home so that they can be good. I want them to play soccer starting when they're 3, so by the time they're in high school, they'll be really good. I want them to take ballet and take piano and play basketball and play football, and I want them to do all these things so they'll be good. Because if they're really good, then that'll develop their self-esteem and they'll feel good about themselves. And as we, with good intent, put pressure on our children to do so many things, it actually creates anxiety for them. because they're overwhelmed and they don't have time to just relax and enjoy who they are. So that can be a detriment. Number 3 is, this will be I want you to put this one on your ponder pad. This is a really good one to self-evaluate. We want our children to like us. And when they don't like us, which they won't from time to time, we feel like we're not being good parents. And so some of us really parent to what will help them like us or their friends like us. It's important for us to be liked by their peers. And we have to realize we are not their buddy. We are and should not seek to be part of their peer group. We are their parent and need to retain that role, and there needs to be a distinction. That doesn't mean that the peers don't have to hate us. That doesn't mean that. But there needs to be a level of respect that comes because you're the parent and you're not just one of the kids. That's important. Number 4, some of us parent out of fear. We are so fearful of the sin and the garbage, the mess that the world's in, that we're almost distrustful of our children all of the time because of what's out there and they might get involved with. And we live on the maybes and the what ifs and the mights, and instead of focusing on building a strong what is and having faith in them. If they know that we don't have faith in them, then they will not have faith in themselves. So some of us do parent out of fear. And then some of us are overzealous in wanting them to be popular. We want to do things and feel now, careful. It is important for them to have friends. That is an important thing. So, but some of us are just focused on making them really popular. They need to be really popular, and consequently teach them that their value lies in whether or not they're popular. And these are all parental hang-ups. These are all things that may lead us to parent in ways that would not be positive in helping to build the children's character. You can see this a lot in helicopter parenting. We've talked about that before. And some people call it lawnmower parenting, where your lawnmower goes in front and makes the path nice and smooth. And I heard the other day a new one, which I hadn't heard before, and it was the snowblower parent who just goes and blows away all the troubles before the child. And all of those become detrimental in teaching children the value of overcoming, the self-worth in overcoming, in the ability to be able to handle problems on their own. So you can see these things, and I just put them on the table because I want you to look at them. They may not be part of you, but my guess is that you're in some of these. Maybe not totally, but there are some of these that truly have entered some of your parenting. Doctrine and Covenants, section 30, verses 1 and 2 is your scriptural reference for the day. And I want you to think about your parenting. And as you think about these hang-ups that we've just kind of gone over that parents have, think about this scripture. And it says, "Behold, I say unto you that you have feared man and have not relied on me for strength as you ought. But your mind has been on the things of the earth more than on the things of me, your Maker, and the ministry whereunto you have been called. And you have not given heed to my spirit, but have been persuaded by those whom I have not commanded." Now, when you read this verse in relationship to parenting, and you look at what's persuading you most, is it what the Lord has commanded? Or is it what other people, even other people in the church, are persuading you to do? The pattern that we look to is the Lord's pattern. And that pattern, just, if you go through this last conference and just look for parenting patterns and counsel, you will have a notebook full of ideas of the things that you need to do to parent wisely. It's not that the Lord's not giving us the counsel. It's that as we receive the counsel, because he gives it line upon line, precept on precept, we have a tendency to make excuses about why we're not doing it. So we say, oh, I think it's so wonderful that we now have a 2-hour program on church. That means that, if my church now is an hour later, I just have that extra hour to get my kids ready for church, and it's wonderful. And when we come home, that's just an extra hour for him to have a nap, and that's wonderful. And so and the time, rather than being intentionally focused on the come follow me and the training and the teaching that goes there, it just disappears. And it's, oh, I believe that that's true. I do believe it's true. But, my kids are just so little, and I just can't, they're just not there yet. So thinking that your excuse becomes valid reason for not keeping the commandment. And that is not true. Well, it is why you're not, but you will not receive the blessings. Then you wonder why you're not receiving the blessings and why there's contention in your home and why the kids are arguing and why your marriage is a little bit not as close as you want it to be. It's because the Lord's told you how to make it what you want. But if you have the excuses about why it's not going to work, even though they may seem valid to you, then that keeps you from the blessings that the Lord would like you to have. We tend to look to other people in their parenting and talk to them about what do you do and what do you do and how do you do that, rather than going to our knees and asking the Lord what we should do, or going to the conference talks, or going to the scriptures and finding out the answers that the Lord would have us do. Does that mean it's bad to get ideas from other people? No, it does not. Sometimes your best inspiration will come from someone else. But we still need to take that to the Lord to see if that's right for our family. And so it needs to be that we look to the Lord for these things. Let me give you another quote. This is one that I love. It made me feel guilty for a lot of years, but now I really love it. This was given by Elder Boyd K. Packer, and it was actually given in 1970. So it's been around for a long time. Some truths have been around a long time, just like the Book of Mormon. It's been around a long time. That's full of truth. And this one is truth. And he said, you can't continue to do what you have been doing, even though you thought it was right, and expect to unproduce some behavior in your child when your conduct was one of the things that produced it. Which means if we're not doing it right, just doing it with more intent won't make it right. We have to change what we're doing. And as the society changes, we have to change how we teach our children, because what they're being influenced by changes. Now that I've made you all feel a little bit like, ugh, I don't know if I could do this, let me share with you a quote from President Spencer W. Kimball. This was given in 1981. How many of you were born after that? Most of you, a lot of you. Okay, this applies to those of you who were youth in 1981 and those of you who were youth after 1981. Because he's talking about this generation of youth. Now, some of you were youthful then and are now adults. That does not negate this promise. What he's saying is, those of you who We're born and we're youth now. This is the promise to you as you get older. So it doesn't stop when you turn 21 and become an adult. This is your promise for you as you go through your life in this time period. Does that make sense? So this is what he promised you. This generation of youth will do deeds that have never been done before. That means you as parents are going to do some parenting like has never been done before because of the obstacles that you're facing now that haven't been here. All of these medias and electronics and all this stuff that makes sin so at your fingertips. You will do deeds that have never been done before. You are going to accomplish the seemingly impossible because you are on his errand. Your generation, you as parents, will fight the greatest army of satanic hosts ever assembled. Do you wonder why there's a little bit of conflict and problems out there? The battle lines are drawn and Satan knows it. You will be severely outnumbered. You will need a deep and abiding faith in Christ to survive. And you will survive. The Lord and his servants will triumph. We know that. So the Lord has said, yes, you are going to be the warriors against the greatest hosts of Satan. But you have been prepared. And you can do it. And you can succeed. And you will. If you stay on his side of the line. Yes?
I'm sorry, who said that?
That was Spencer W. Kimball. In May of 1981. It was a letter to the youth of the church. It was in the Church News, the 9th of May, 1981, on page 9, if you wanted to know. It's a great quote. I love it. I love it. And I think that one will be in the syllabus, because it's one of the ones I really, really love. So today, what I want to do is talk about six tools that are just really quite essential for you to intentionally teach and train your children. The first one is how to do intentional teaching. Second one is the levels of learning, how we teach so that children can understand. We may spend a lot of time talking at our children without ever teaching them anything. So how do the levels of learning develop so that we can go to a point that it will change their behavior? How do we teach to that? The art of motivating them. How do we get them motivated to want to do something? Number 4 will be helping your children take charge of problem solving so they don't become entitled and they don't become dependent. They learn how to stand on their own and to do that with confidence. And number 5 is how do we teach our children to love the Lord and to serve others? And number 6 is teaching your children the plan of salvation and the doctrine of the family. Because those are the things that will keep them straight in the course of wanting to marry in the temple and have celestial families. And this world is teaching them all kinds of deviant behavior from that. So let's start with intentional parenting. That's the first step. Intentional parenting is just exactly what Elder Ballard said in a conference talk when he said, what we need is more righteous, intentional parenting. That means we get away from reactive parenting. Reactive parenting is where we wait for a child to misbehave and then we react to that misbehavior. So our teaching correct principles is as we react to their negative behavior, we think that teaches them positive behavior. So instead of teaching them how to to speak kindly to one another when they're not having conflict. We teach it as a principle. We wait until they're yelling at each other, and then we say, we don't talk to each other that way. Now, you're going to have to go in your own room if you can't stop yelling with each other. And so we react. We wait for them to have a negative behavior. We react to it and think that what they're hearing is, oh, I need to talk nicely. So what we have to do is stop trying to teach right and wrong from the negative standpoint and focus on teaching right and wrong from the positive standpoint. That's intentional behavior, intentional teaching, where we have in mind what we want them to learn, and then we intentionally go about teaching that. I just spent this last weekend down in Provo to some activities of some grandchildren, and they just got a new puppy for Christmas. And it's a little yellow lab puppy that is absolutely darling. Of course, I think all puppies are darling. Doesn't mean I like all dogs, but I think all puppies are darling. And this is a cute little roly-poly. This puppy was born at Halloween, so it's about 2.5 months old, and just adorable. Now, my son has 9 children, the youngest of which is about 18 months, the oldest of which is 18. And within this realm, they have 7 boys and 2 girls. They have a lot of energy in that house, a lot of energy. And so it was very interesting to me, and this is an example of righteous, intentional parenting. As I watched the mom, Angie, they had little gates so that this dog stayed in the kitchen, dining room, laundry room area where they have floors compatible to puppies. And she told me, as I watched her, I was fascinated by what she was doing with this puppy. And she fed the dog 4 times a day, a half a cup of food. So most of us would put a pile of food out for the dog and let him just eat whenever they're hungry. She had hers a half a cup 4 times a day, and she had water out all the time. She had her timer set for 20 minutes, and every 20 minutes took the puppy out for little potty breaks. And then she has a very aggressive little 5-year-old boy. I mean, he is the most active little guy I've ever seen. And he would come into the kitchen and just, you know how you get a rag or something, and you play with him and you pull him around and just get that puppy so hypered up. And she said, no, we want him to be calm. We want this puppy to be calm. We want Gracie to have plenty to chew on, because puppies like to chew. But we don't want you to get him all riled up, because then he'll start jumping on you. We don't want him jumping on people. So she would go over there, and when Joshy would come out there, she would sit down with Josh, and the puppy's name was Gracie, and she would sit down with Gracie and Josh and help Josh learn how to play with the puppy without overexciting the puppy. So when she had to go out of the kitchen, one of the older children needed to be in the kitchen to help that dog always learn. And I said, we've had dogs with my kids growing up, and I said, Angie, and she's not a dog person. She just felt very inspired that her children needed this opportunity, and so she got this puppy. She says, I've had my last baby, now I can focus on raising a puppy. And so, and she's doing it with real intent. And I said, what makes you, how did you know to feed a dog 4 times? And the other thing she was doing was she took the dog leash and she just clipped it onto the dog collar and let him just pull the leash around wherever he went. And you know how puppies like to chew on the leash? They don't like that. She had put something on it you buy at the store that made it taste really, really, really nasty. And so the dog never chewed on the leash, but would drag it around all across the kitchen and all through the dining room and just drag that leash around so that he learns to feel comfortable. Then when they take him out to walk him on a leash, he's comfortable with that leash. And I said, I never would have thought of any of that. We just had a puppy. And I said, where did you? She said, I have been online and I have found 2 really good sites about training lab puppies. And she says, and I have studied it, and I have read it, and she said, I'm going to have this dog for 15 years, I want it to be a good dog. I want it to be a good dog. And it was interesting when I walked into the kitchen. Of course, the puppy comes right over to a new person and sniffs you, and as puppies will do, and started to jump up on me. And as soon as that little Gracie started to jump, she was right there, and she sat down with Grace and let Grace smell, she's just curious, new smells, that's puppies. And then gave her something else to chew on so she wouldn't jump on me. I personally appreciated that because I was dressed for Sunday and I really didn't want, but that's real intent, okay? That was the most profound experience I have seen with parenting, and now it was a puppy, but parenting with real intent. And I have found, as we've had puppies in our own home, there's not that much difference between parenting a puppy and parenting a child. They both have to be trained in kind of the same ways. And so when we want to seek and find out with real intent how we should train our children, then we will receive the same kind of information. But you see, the intent, the desire has to be up front. Then you do the research, find the tools, and then you apply them. Now, where do you find the tools? You find them in classes, you find them in conference talks, you find them in the scriptures, you find them on your knees. And you will receive more information than Angie could ever receive on the internet about her puppy. But one of the things that I think is critical to understand, this is a quote from Elder Holland. And it's from a missionary training film that was given down at, it's shown in a missionary training center. And you can't get a copy of it. I can't get a copy of it. But I had my son who works there copy this quote for me because I loved it. I loved it. So I don't know if it's legit that I have it, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. Go undercover. This is a quote from a video from the MTC, from Elder Holland. He says, and now I want you to listen to this as he would be giving it to missionaries, okay? So that you're a missionary and you're listening to this and how to deal with prospective investigators, okay? Listen to it that way. Everything in the conversation process must happen to you before it happens to them, the investigator. Second only to listening to the Spirit is the responsibility to listen to the investigator with patient sincerity and the ability to go where the investigator is, into the highways and byways of their lives. We need to be enthusiastic, inspired teaching. Search, ponder, plan, and pray. Every lesson should be tailor-made to focus on that investigator as an individual. Missionaries can be unfocused. They can drone on 2 or 3 times longer than is necessary. Search the soul of the investigator at every turn. Look into their eyes to discern their uniqueness and their distinctiveness. If you want your investigator to pray more diligently, then you pray more diligently. If you want your investigator to read the scriptures more diligently, then you read the scriptures. If you want your investigator to repent, then you repent. If you want your investigator to be more committed, then you be more committed. Now turn that to parenting. Then the part I liked was sometimes we parents drone on 3 or 4 times longer than our children are willing to listen to. Sometimes we don't look into their eyes to see if the lessons that we are teaching are focused on individual children and not just the topic that we want to get across. We have to focus application into individual hearts, else it won't be there. we have to listen to the Spirit teach us how to teach individuals. Now, you've heard Elder Ballard's unto into. So our responsibility is to bring all gospel teaching, love of the Savior, the commandments, the covenants. We bring all of that unto the heart of our children. Then it is our responsibility to have created an environment of trust and love where when we bring that unto with intent individually to that child, they will open their heart and let it into. But every child is individual and has to be trained individually. We cannot do it in mass. Though we will present a lot of things in mass, in home evening, and we're talking in family scriptures. But whether or not that's getting through to him, you have to determine individually. And each child will accept it at a different rate. Some might pick it up right now. Some, they may not be ready for that for 2 years. So you can't, intentional parenting is not a one-time event. That you teach that principle and okay, that one's off the checklist. Now, let's go on to the next. Oh, that's off the checklist. It is a continuous process, particularly if you have more than one child. We tend to be really good with the first child, and by the time you get down to the end, you're hoping they picked it up by osmosis because you're still working on stuff for the first one. And it's very hard to go back to the first square with the last child. But they deserve it, and they have the right to learn it in the same way. Okay, so in with this intentional teaching, I'm going to throw something out that's just totally random for some of you. You'll never have thought of this. I want you to think about the things you want your children to know before they leave home. Because those things have to be taught with real intent. Okay, I think probably you've all written down something or a couple of somethings. Let me throw out a few more somethings. Of course, I think you probably wrote down things like a testimony of the gospel and a knowledge of the Savior, and probably hard work, how to serve. Let's do a few other things, more practical perhaps. How to take care of a car, how to change the oil, how to check the oil, how to check the air in the tire, how to change a tire, how to budget. More than just paying tithing and fast offerings, how do you budget for school, for clothes, for a mission, for college? How do you create a budget and learn that budget then translates into paying a mortgage and paying utilities and making a car payment and paying insurance? And do they know that all of those things are out there? Do they know how to, with confidence and with respect, make their own appointments? Can they call the dentist and make an appointment? We say, well, that's what I do. I'm the mother. I make the appointments. Well, from the time they leave your door and walk into the MTC and walk out of the MTC, they got to make appointments for dinners and for investigators. They got to know how to talk to somebody, not text. Actually verbalize conversation. That's learned in your home. They need to learn how to file tax returns. So it's good for them to have a job. They need to learn to do yard work. They need to learn how to plan healthy meals, go shopping for healthy meals, and prepare healthy meals. And they can be very, very simple. They need to learn how to do that on a budget. So one of the things you might decide to do is say, okay, I will give you X amount of dollars and you're in charge of the food. You're in charge of dinner on Wednesday night. You have this amount of money. That's what I allot for a meal. So you're also entitled to use the pantry, what we have there, but you can't overspend. And it has to be a healthy meal. And you need a vegetable, and you need a carbohydrate, and you need a protein, and you need... So you're teaching them, and then you give them the opportunity to act. So it has to be, that's what we're talking about, the levels of learning. It's not enough just to teach your children the food wheel. They need to have the experience of pulling that stuff together. They need to learn to memorize their social security number. They need to know basic politics and what different sides stand for, and how to find out honest input about what sources do you go to. And it's not always the television. It usually isn't. How do you unclog the toilet or clean the little trap underneath the sink? How do you set a mouse trap? How do you empty a mouse trap if it got caught? How do you work past comfort? How do you do laundry without turning everything pink or blue? How often do you change the sheets on your bed? And how do you do that? How do you put a sheet on a bed? They don't just miraculously appear. How do you clean out a refrigerator? What do you toss? What do you save? Do you see? There's a lot that we need to be teaching our children with intent, to give them confidence to be able to go out into the world. I think one of the main things we need to teach our children in this day is how to fail and how to manage stress, and those need to be taught. So you can create your own list of things that you need to teach your children with real intent, but they need to include some of these practical things. Now, lest you become totally overwhelmed, you can incorporate all kinds of other people to help you. You can ask, well, we won't have scout leaders for very much longer, but our young men's leaders, to have an evening on cars where they learn to check the oil, check the tire pressure, learn how to change a tire, and then have them come home and do it on one of your cars so that it's reinforced. You don't have to teach everything. I will not teach my children how to set a mousetrap. I don't do that. But my husband does, and he can teach them how to put peanut butter on the mousetrap and catch the mouse and empty it. So you personally are not responsible, but you may personally need to be responsible in creating the list of things that you feel are important that they know. I had one daughter who married a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful young man. I loved him. But they were driving up to Heber, from Provo up to Heber, up the canyon, and got a flat tire and had no clue how to change a tire. They had no idea how to get it off, and they actually put it on backwards, and some passing motorist was kind enough to help them turn it around so it would go on. But those are things that our kids, boys and girls, can learn how to do that, and it helps prepare them. Okay, the second part is levels of learning and teaching. It's teaching and learning. It's your level of teaching so that it's their level of learning. And this is extremely important because I think a lot of times we give ourselves credit, rightfully so, for teaching a principle, but then we become very frustrated because our children are not living the principle. So we said, I taught you that. You don't do that. But there's a lot more to presenting an idea, to having an idea internalized where it motivates behavior. There's a whole bunch in here. It doesn't just go from presenting to application. And so we have to learn what that picture looks like. It's a little bit different for every child, meaning how quickly they'll take these things on and learn them is different depending on the child. But you need to kind of have in the back of your mind these levels of learning and evaluate where they are on that spectrum in regards to any given principle. And if they're not quite to application, then you need to fill in that blanks. So the first part, let's take for example, and this is why I love Come Follow Me. This is the epitome of teaching this principle. This Come Follow Me for individuals and families. If you will follow this, you will get this principle. You will get it, but you have to follow it with real intent. The intentional parenting part. So have any of you started this? Where you have read it and you've done the questions and you've looked at the questions that have followed through so that you have a feeling for what goes on. I have my own little, this is where I write stuff down rather than writing it in my book. But because if you follow this, you notice they give you a principle, they have you read some scriptures, then they ask you questions about it. You know, how do you feel about it, or what would happen to you? That's it. So let me show you this, how these levels of learning, and then I want you to look for it as you go through your Come Follow Me. Okay? Because this is, I get so excited because the Lord's just doing it. I mean, He's making it easy. It's right here. You can just do it. Heavenly Father, you're so awesome. You just give us the way to do it. So the first level is knowledge. So let's take, for example, let's just run through the Joseph Smith story. So you're having family home meeting and you sit down and you tell the story of Joseph Smith reading in James, feeling that he wanted to know, went out and he prayed, and the wonderful vision that he had of the Father and the Son. So you're sharing the story. As you present that story, this is knowledge, it's called knowledge, you're presenting facts. And the child receives it simply as a storyline. This is what happened. These are the facts. This is where it happened, and this is who it happened to, and it's knowledge. Now, let me just show you a little bit. If this is what you did, now your child goes to primary the next week, and the primary teacher says, who knows the story about Joseph Smith? Oh, Johnny raises it, I know, and tells the story perfectly because you just had it in family home meeting. That primary teacher comes to you and says, oh, you're doing such a great job being a mom. He knew all about that story, which is fabulous. But if we then check off his learning about that, because he repeated it, we missed the boat. Knowledge will never change our character. Knowledge won't make us celestial. We have to have knowledge. It's the first step. But knowing something is different than becoming something. So the first thing is, yes, to teach our children to know it. Then the second level is to help our children be able to take those facts and create understanding of those facts. And that answers the questions of why. You know that Joseph Smith read the scriptures. You know that he went and prayed, and you know that he had a vision. Let's go back. Why was he reading the scriptures? Why did he go pray? What happened before, during, and after the vision? Now, as you answer these questions about why, you're still focused on Joseph Smith's experience. So now I know what happened, and now I know why. My understanding is getting deeper, but it's still Joseph's story. So the next level of learning, and sometimes these things happen quickly, sometimes they don't, is how they take this understanding for Joseph Smith and internalize that it can happen to me. So if Joseph Smith had a question and searched in the scriptures, if I have a question, I can search in the scriptures. What you do in this step is take the them, there, then, and have them transfer it to me here and now. Now it's becoming a reality to them. Now it is becoming real. And then the last level, the fourth level, is when they take this and now act upon it. So if you follow in Come Follow Me, they present the scriptures to read, so you are learning about it. And then they talk about what was happening and whys. And then you notice how they ask questions. They ask questions about you and your own life. That's taking it to the internalization. And then when they have you write down, so what happened when you had this experience and what were you thinking? And as you make that journal, then you're applying it. So this is the perfect example of how to make this work. Unless we get our children from knowledge to application, we're not through with our teaching. We're not through. And then we have to reach the point where that application is self-motivated because they've had experience in it rather than motivated by us telling them what to do. Does that make sense? Now, bottom line is it requires a lot of time. But if you'll get a vision of it, a focus of it, it's not as hard as it seems. You just have to be more aware of sharing your experiences with it. You know, this is writing them down, but then as you meet together and you talk once a week about these things, as you share your experiences with them, it's coming down all those levels. It's helping them realize and live gospel principle in all those levels. So this is the perfect example of how to teach and train and do so that you can get a real picture of what that looks like. Okay, the third thing that we wanted to talk about today is the art of motivation. And some of you will say, whoa, I have got this butterfly child that I would do anything to be able to motivate, to be more focused. They just can't seem to get with the program at all, ever. And so this becomes how much we would love it if all of our children were self-motivated. The thing about this level, teaching on this principle, is that it takes a lot of time with some children to help them learn to be focused and motivated, and others almost come with it inbred in them. So don't compare. Don't compare your children. Some of them need more teaching and training on that, and some of our children already know it. But there's a lot we can do to help in motivating children to act righteously on their own. And let me give you a few of them. A lot of these we will go in more detail in some of our other lessons, but let's just go over a few of them. The first one would be the 10-to-1. Children need to be validated 10 times more than corrected. So you need to be intentionally focused on validating. Last semester we talked about praise and encouragement. There is a right and a wrong way to say a positive to a child. So, for the purpose of this class, the Cliff Note version, focus on effort, not on their value. Let me give you an example. You would say, instead of, you are such a good boy for cleaning this room, You're focusing on value. You become good because the room is cleaned. That's not what you want to focus on. You want to focus on effort. So we always want to acknowledge effort because anyone can apply effort. So a child who struggles in math and gets a C minus, but worked their little heart out, can actually receive more approval, validation, than the A student who didn't do diddly squat and got the A just because they're smart. We want to validate effort. Are you doing your best? It's what you're putting into it. So we validate that effort. As we do, they start feeling really well about themselves. And if they didn't put much effort into it, they know that they can. Only they have power over that. So it's not what they're born with, or it's not what, they know that they have power and control over that. So in your 10 to 1, focus intentionally on looking for the effort. Now, some of you, that will be very hard to do because you've already created a habit of saying your positives in a way that creates value for them. So the question I want you to use, if that's your challenge, the question I want you to ask yourself is, before you say, "Oh, you're such a good boy for doing your room," think in your mind, why is he a good boy? Why? Well, I'm feeling that he's really good and he's done well right now because his room's clean. Then direct your comment to the room being clean. I love the way you made your bed. Oh, look, there's nothing in the middle of the floor. That is so awesome. Look at this dresser. Wow. There's nothing on it except what's supposed to be there. Love the way you puffed up your pillow. Oh, look at that teddy bear just sleeping so nice on that pillow. So you are validating their effort, not creating them as a good person because of one thing or another. This goes miles to helping motivate them to wanting to put forth effort to do good things. If you learn to say that right. Notes of appreciation. Some of your children are embarrassed if you verbally acknowledge them too much. And so a written note of appreciation, tucked on a mirror, put on their bed, put in a lunchbox, put in the coat pocket, but the note must be written with that same thing in mind, that you are commenting on, not on a product, but on effort, on the effort. I appreciate the way that you were so kind in reading a story to your sister last night. Effort is into being kind and reading the story, not, "You're such a good girl for reading the story to your sister last night." Does that make sense? So a written note is often very much appreciated. The other thing that creates this motivation is when you express faith in them. I'm sure you can do that. They come to you, and we'll talk about problem solving here in a minute, but you say, "I know you can figure it out. Let me know what you decide. Tell me what you think. I know that you can handle that." When we express our confidence and faith in them, it builds them and motivates them to want to produce that behavior even more. Another thing is, individually, I would say privately, but very specifically, tell them of their spiritual gifts. Tell them what the Spirit has prompted you is their spiritual gift. And as you tell them this with a very sincere heart, without being too flamboyant or gushy or over the top, but just spirit to spirit, it becomes very motivating for them to want to magnify that gift. And so as you take one child aside and say, I just feel very prompted. The Spirit has told me that your spiritual gift is a peacemaker. I am so grateful that you are in our family because I see you. When Johnny and Susan were fighting over that toy, I saw you try and go and help them to be happy about that. And I just know that that was a special gift that Heavenly Father gave you to bring to this family, and I'm so grateful for you. Now, what do you think that does to the heart of that child? Makes them want to go, ooh, let's see if there's another problem I can solve. Woohoo! You know, it just validates their value and their need, your need to have them in here. Okay, I've told you all the positive stuff for helping to motivate them. Now I'm going to tell you some of the stuff that you'll go, what? And that's the ones I really love to tell you because it's so fun to watch your face go, are you kidding me? To motivate them. Now, because these do not have your payoff in the moment, it's long term to help in motivation, then sometimes you miss it as a cue. You motivate them by not rescuing them. By not rescuing them. By not being a helicopter mom. By holding them accountable. You help them create this feeling of motivation by, I want to say the word require, and my mind's thinking maybe that's not the right word to use. So put in the right word, the one that that I can't think of, that I should be put in here. But requiring that they should be outdoors for a certain part of every day. They need to be fed with this Lord's beautiful world. They need to feel the sunshine and the fresh air. And as they do that, that very spirit that the Lord has created in this world will motivate them. And don't you feel happier after you go for a walk? I mean, it is just invigorating, even if you don't like exercise. The outdoors is still a wonderful source of motivation for good. So all of us, all of them should spend some time outside each day. Now this next one is one that you'll find really probably the hardest to swallow. So think about it for a while. And that is allow them time to be bored. We're too quick to resolve their boredom issues. I'm bored. Can I play games on the screen? Can I have your phone? Can I play Nintendo? Where I play whatever the games are. I don't even know what the games are. But can I do electronic because I'm bored? And the answer is no. Does that create a little bit more stress? I mean, a little bit more noise and whining. And we usually say yes because it buys peace. Peace, don't buy it because you lose. It's on sale. It's not worth it. It's not worth teaching them. Now, let me tell you why it's good to let them be bored. Because it's in those moments that they will be forced, if you will, to exercise creativity. Now they have to figure out what to do with themselves. Will they create a story? Will they write a poem? Will they, it's good to have hobbies for them. You know, help them develop hobbies. But it's in these moments where someone else isn't telling you what to do that your imagination flies and soars. And these are good things. We give them too much stuff in life, toys, you know, that have, you play with this toy this way and it's already predetermined and pre-programmed, that we don't let them just fly with imagination. And we need to create those moments which usually come from them being bored and you not rescuing them, that, yes?
So I think we kind of talked about this a little bit last semester, and during this break over Christmas, first we decided we weren't going to buy them a bunch of toys, so I told them they could pick, like, they got one toy from Santa and one toy from us, but it wasn't like a bunch of things that they got for Christmas. And we didn't have a lot of stuff planned this break, and they had very little TV, And for most of the time, they kind of just wandered around the house. They didn't know what to do. I'm like, go play. You got toys. You got this. But I would just kind of let them be. And like, you do what you want to do. If you want to just wander around, they kind of bugged each other a little bit. And they did this and they did that. And I was like, why are they not playing? But I just felt like that's what I should do. Like,
Yes.
I didn't create a bunch
Yes.
of activities. I'm like, you guys know you have this time at home. It's the only time you have before school starts. So kind of wanted to let them choose and find. And finally, like the last 2 days, they found their Legos and started playing with them. Like, guys, you've been home for 2 weeks, and like the last 2 days you decided to play. But you know, maybe it was the time that they needed from being at school so much and having so much going on. They needed that time, and it took them maybe longer than I thought. But
Yeah.
Eventually, they started to come up with their time. They were all happy playing together and building all these Legos and stuff. And kind of wish they would have had more time to enjoy that, but I think it was a good lesson for them to.
Perfect.
Be
And
bored.
as summer approaches, it'll be a lesson they'll relearn. They'll learn it faster.
Right.
They'll pick it up faster. I love dress-up boxes. And sometimes you have to say, I think you need to come up with a play for family home evening. Go figure it out. You know, you might have to give them some prompts, but don't entertain them. That's the key. Don't entertain them. You are not their entertaining committee. Okay. The next one is to help them learn how to problem solve. We are way too quick, and this is what is one of the factors that creates anxiety in children and stress, is because they don't know. They come into a problem and they don't know what to do with it, and so they get very, 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 very anxious. And so learning this skill is one of the steps in helping them learn how to control anxiety. And so in teaching them how to problem solve, the first step is don't do it for them. And we tend to do it. They'll say, oh, this boy was being really mean to me at school. Well, did you? Da-da-da-da-da-da. And we give them answers. And we have to stop doing that. And we can actually stop doing that at a very young age. Because as we develop the ability to ask questions, the very questions will teach them as they answer them. You're actually teaching them as you walk through the answers rather than you just feeding it to them. So they become dependent on you as their resource to solve everything for them. So if there's ever any trouble, you should take care of it. And they become dependent rather than becoming independent as they learn how to problem solve. Now, this has to be taught with you. You have to have two prerequisites. Number one, you have to have empathy. You can't go into a problem-solving situation and you already predisposed to thinking, this is so silly. You cannot have any preconceived judgment in it. So you have to come from a point of empathy, and then you also have to come from a point of conveying to them faith, a feeling that you have faith that they can do it. And they can be very, very young. They could be 4. You can start this at least age 4, very young. You really want to have applied it before they start school. So you want to start it young. So let me give you the steps to teaching children to problem solve proactively. And remembering that they learn to be proactive by you allowing them to take charge of their own challenge, which to you could be a nothing, so then we tend to solve it. Oh, brother, just go. And when we should, step back and let them come to that. So number 1, show empathy. So the first thing you do is reflect back to them that you understand their concern. This has got to be kind of hard. This is really bothering you, isn't it? I can see that this is a challenge for you. So you're reflecting back to them. Do not, one of my pet peeves is this mirrored stuff, where he says, they come to you and say, I'm really unhappy. And you say, oh, are you really unhappy? Don't do that. That's so demeaning. But you reflect back empathy. I can see that you're really concerned. This has got to be upsetting. You're giving them permission to have a problem. Okay? Number 2, then give them the power or the responsibility to solve it. And so you would say, what do you think you can do about that? That's kind of tough. Man, what are your ideas? I don't know. Well, what do you think? Don't be quick to jump in and give them the answer. Let them think. Let them ponder. Let them, and it may be that you need to come back to it. Let's talk about this again after lunch. It may be that, whoa, this is such a new idea to them that they have to solve it, that they don't quite know what to do with it. So don't be afraid to give them time. But you cannot be in this with any kind of intonation in your voice that you are disciplining them. It's not discipline. It's I have faith that you can figure this out. So it's a totally different tone of voice. You can say the same things, but watch your tone. Number 3, if they do seem stumped and they just can't seem to make progress on it, ask their permission before giving ideas. Well, is it okay if I share with you something that I tried once when I was a little girl that seemed to work? Because by you asking permission, you are still holding them accountable of being in charge. So when you just start telling them, then you're taking over the responsibility. If you ask permission, they still remain in charge. After you've talked about several things, have the child state what the consequences of the choice would be that they may have decided on. So if they make a choice and say, well, maybe I could do this, then say, well, what do you think would happen if you chose that? Help them to learn to be far thinking so that they're relating decisions and consequences and they're thinking them through before they act. So help them, ask them, what do you think would happen if you did that? Then, step 5 is give the child permission to go forward with their decision. Now, this is where it gets really tricky for some parents because perhaps they have made a decision that you know is not going to work. If there's no horrible, terrible consequence, let them go for it. They will fail. I mean, you can see it. But use that failure as an opportunity to teach them about failure. And if you fail, you simply make a different choice and go down another path, and it's all okay. And it really becomes a wonderful learning tool in teaching them how to fail. After, then you evaluate the experience. Return and report. After it's over, come back. Did it work? Did it not work? What would you do different? What were the good sides? What were the ones that didn't work so bad? As you teach them this principle, they start to focus on things that are in their control, rather than blaming their situation on things that are out of their control. They learn to take what's in their control, use it to create solutions. And ultimately, you help them develop resilience to fail and to just take another path. I love what they said in conference. Was it, not this last one, the one before, it says fail with enthusiasm. I love that. Yes, it's okay. It's all right. So it's to teach them that they can fail and it's okay, and simply to move forward with a different focus. Try something else. Number 5, teach them to love the Lord and to serve others. This comes in how you handle Come Follow Me, family home evening, family prayer, family scripture study, and perhaps one of the least used but really powerful is you bearing testimony to various principles. And you don't necessarily, as a matter, I would not recommend that you start that with,
let me bear my testimony to you about tithing.
You don't. You just share the experience, and the experience bears your testimony. You don't have to define it. So you say, you're reading in the scriptures about tithing. You say, we had some experiences when we were first married with tithing. I had an experience when I was in college with tithing. I didn't have any money, except enough to pay my tithing. And I did. And this is what happened. That's a testimony. That's your testimony. And you don't precede it by,
let me bear you my testimony.
And you don't end it.
In the name.
You don't. That becomes so, that they turn that off. But when you share with them a sacred experience where the application of that principle strengthened you. Prayer. I was praying. I didn't know where my keys were. We do that a lot. Sometimes kids think that's the only answer to prayers. When you lost something, you pray for it. So you need to share with them other experiences. I was really frightened when I had to teach my Relief Society lesson. So I went in and prayed. And I felt calm. Now, what do they know? They can happen. Your teaching is testifying that these things are true. So that is one of the tools that we don't use often enough to teach with. In teaching them how to, number 6 was to teaching them the plan of salvation and the doctrine of the family. We need to teach the proclamation to the family, to our children. We need to teach them the eternal principle of the doctrine of the family. It isn't just we believe in growing up and getting married in the temple and having a family. This is the eternal plan of salvation. This is the purpose for the creation of this earth. This is more than just finding somebody really cute that you want to marry. There's purpose to this. And as they understand the divinity and the purpose of the doctrine of the family, which is taught through teaching the proclamation on the family, through temple attendance and extracting temple names and going to the temple and doing baptisms, and for them seeing you go often to the temple to serve in that holy house, you claim blessings. Elder Renland, in the previous conference, and President Nelson, in his last talk in this last conference, will give you incredible blessings to attending the temple. We're actually going to talk about those next week. But that is the answer and the why and the how we teach this last principle of teaching them the plan of salvation and the doctrine of the family. Yes?
It occurs to me that really it comes down to we need to teach them the whole picture of the plan and the doctrine of the family being eternal, because our life plans for our families do not always end up the way that we think the ideal will be. And if you don't have a testimony of the eternal nature of it, when your life plan gets derailed, it can throw you for a loop if you don't have that foundation.
I'm so glad you said that, because sometimes as parents, we think that the way you teach the gospel is to teach the rules. And it's not teaching the rules. It's teaching the doctrine. The doctrine of why is this great plan in focus. It's the why. It's not the to-do list. It's the why that gives us power in this great plan. All right, here's your homework. Number 1. You realize I give you 4 or 5 things. If you do one of them, I'm feeling really good about it. Number 1, I want you to study with your family the proclamation. And I say with your family, that could be a discussion at dinner. It doesn't have to be a family home evening if you don't want it to be. Those of you who are overachievers will have your family memorize it. And there are many who have done that. And that is a powerful thing, but I'm not asking you to do that. Just saying, if you study it, you read it together and talk about it. Talk about what it means. Number 2, I want you to think and ponder, or I invite you to think and ponder, about one experience in your life where you have gone through all 5 levels of learning. And then I'd like you to share that with your family. Number 3, begin a list, like I was telling you about the car and the oil and begin a list of things that you would like your children to accomplish before they leave home. And then pick one and figure out how to make it happen. And number 4, this is what I want you to do. Read Come Follow Me by Elder Hales, November 2016. And in this talk, make a list of the things you can do to be a better parent. I did this after reading his talk. I took out all the things, all the parenting ideas in it and made a list. It's an amazing talk. And then choose one of them to focus on, which means you may pray about it and ask how to implement it. Have the Lord teach you how to implement it. So those are your invitations. I don't expect you'll do all of them, but I hope that you will choose to do at least one. In closing, let me share with you a story. There was a professor of philosophy who was a deeply committed atheist. His primary goal for one required class was to spend the entire semester attempting to prove that God did not exist. His students were always afraid to argue with him because of his impeccable logic. For 20 years, he had taught this class, and no one had ever had the courage to go against him. Sure, some had argued in class at times, but no one had ever really gone against him because of his reputation. At the end of every semester, on the last day, he would say to his class of 300 students or so, "If there is anyone here who still believes in Jesus, stand up." In 20 years, no one had ever stood up. They knew what he was going to do next. He would say, "Because anyone who believes in God is a fool. If God existed, he could stop this piece of chalk from hitting the ground and breaking. Such a simple task to prove that he is God, and yet he can't do it." And every year he would drop the chalk onto the floor of the classroom, and it would shatter into 100 pieces. All of the students would do nothing but stop and stare. Most of the students thought that God couldn't exist. Certainly a number of Christians had slipped through, but for 20 years they had been too afraid to stand up. A few years ago, there was a freshman who happened to enroll. He was a Christian and had heard the stories about this professor. He was required to take the class for his major, and he was afraid. But for 3 months that semester, he prayed every morning and every evening that he would have the courage to stand up, no matter what the professor said or what the class thought. Nothing they said could ever shatter his faith. He hoped. Finally, the day came. The professor said, "If there is anyone here who still believes in God, stand up." The professor and the class of 300 people looked at him, shocked, as he stood up at the back of the classroom. The professor shouted, "You fool! If God existed, he would keep this piece of chalk from breaking when it hit the ground." He proceeded to drop the chalk as he had done before. It slipped out of his, as he did, it slipped out of his fingers, off his shirt cuff, onto the pleat of his pants, down his leg, and off his shoe. As it hit the ground, it simply rolled away unbroken. The professor's jaw dropped as he stared at the chalk. He looked up at the young man and then ran out of the lecture hall. The young man who had stood proceeded to walk to the front of the room and shared his faith in Jesus Christ for the next half hour. 300 students stayed and listened as he told of God's love for them and of his power through Jesus Christ. Will your child have the courage to stand up and say, I believe? In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.